continuing our series on the Apostle Paul, a man who has had a radical 180 change in his life. Literally going on the road to a city to persecute and to throw Christians in jail, and then turned around so radically that the world was changed forever. And we looked at how that came to be and the process that Paul went through. And in our minds, it's so easy to think that after that occasion, after Paul miraculously met Jesus on that road to Damascus, that all of a sudden he's like, that's it, I got to go to Caesar, right? That's it, let's go do this, guys. Gathered all the apostles around and said, let's go evangelize, let's go preach the gospel right now. But that's not exactly what happened. Things didn't take off that quickly. It took some time. We live in a culture, though, where we have to admit we like things quick. We like things to be fast. There was one evening a few weeks back where I was really hungry one night. Like really hungry, so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to regret this decision later, but I'm going to McDonald's at like 11 o'clock, right? You know you're going to regret it. You know it's not a good decision, but you're like, I'm just so hungry. So you go there, and I can't remember if it was closed or there were just way too many people, but it was not quick enough for me. So I said, okay, that's it. I'm going to go to another McDonald's. That one was closed. I said, okay, not a problem. We're in America. There's fast food places everywhere. So I'm like, okay, like Wendy's, closed. Taco Bell, I was like, that's open late, right? Closed. Staff shortages, economy, pandemic, whatever, nothing was open. And I was thinking, like, I want my food right now. And I was in such a state of mind that I had to realize that only 30 minutes had passed. Yeah, in those 30 minutes, I went from like, hey, I'm hungry, I could get a bite to eat, to why don't I have food right now? What is wrong? That's how quickly we want some things, even in our lives. We start off saying it'd be nice to have something. It'd be nice to have the newest model of a phone or clothes or whatever. And then we get really impatient when maybe we don't have those things, because society around us emphasizes quickness and emphasizes readiness. The danger in that, though, is that you can become superficial pretty quick. You can want or start to want things just because you want them quick. And as you all know, if you want a quality product, sometimes it takes time, right? If you want a custom car, for example, it takes time to make that. There's quality that goes into it. It doesn't come just like that. If you want to have a nice suit and you want it tailored or a dress, it takes time. You have to go in, you have to get it tailored. Then there's a week or two wait. But it's worth it because it's something not just superficial. It's not something that you just bought in an instant. You spent time with it. It becomes more valuable. When we look at our spiritual lives, there's an author named Richard Foster who wrote The Celebration of Discipline. I highly recommend this book. If you're starting in your faith, or even if you're in it, at any stage that you're in, read this book, Celebration of Discipline. He says this. He says, superficiality is the curse of our age. The doctrine of instant satisfaction is a primarily spiritual problem. The desperate need today is not for a great number of intelligent people or even gifted people, but for deep people. And I want you to remember that word for tonight, deep people. Has someone ever said something to you and you're like, whoa, bro, that's so deep, right? That's so deep I can't even see you anymore, right? It's like there are something so profound, you're like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Because maybe somebody spent time to think about it. Maybe somebody went through something and sharing some wisdom. You're like, man, preach, right? That's truth. That's really deep. Because they spent time thinking about it. They spent time meditating on it. Think of a weed. A weed grows up really quick. But guess what? Its roots are superficial. They're on the surface. And Jesus talks about this as well. Some people who hear the faith, but they don't grow deep roots. They just spring up. They maybe go to a conference or hear the word, and they spring up and they have so much zeal, and that's good, but they don't want to go deeper. They just want to remain at that experience. But then when a heavy storm comes, or wind or rain, it sweeps them away because they don't have deep roots. And in our walk with God, we're called to go deeper. We're not called to stay at superficial level. When you think of your relationship with God, and everyone can answer this in your own mind, or when you think of God, what's the first thing your mind goes to? I think for a lot of us, it's church, going somewhere, being in a building, singing, doing something. And sometimes it stops there. Those are good things, but sometimes it remains at that level. When we think of our relationships with God, sometimes it stops right there. And then when you say to others, I'm a Christian, sometimes in your mind, what that means is, well, I go to church. But it's much, much more than that. It has to go deeper than that. Going to church and singing and worshiping is a result of a deep relationship with God. That's where we come to celebrate. We come on Sundays and on Fridays to celebrate what God's done in our lives. We come together as a church, as brothers and sisters, to celebrate, to help one another, and to lift each other up, to build each other up. Not just, I haven't picked up my Bible all week and now there's a chance to read it. Or I haven't sung all week, or I haven't prayed all week and this is my time to pray. You know, I've never agreed with that mentality of well, I don't get spiritually fed in the church. A church needs to be a place where spiritual food is prepared, right? Where you hear sermons and songs and you leave, joyful. But listen here. It cannot be your primary source of interaction with God. It cannot be. If it is, it's superficial. If this is the only time of the week where you think about God, where you open the Bible, where you pray, you're living a life of a superficial relationship with God. Because during the other 6 days of the week, your soul is starving. Your spirit is starving. And it's requesting that communication with God, that interaction with God. But if you don't go deeper, you stay stagnant. And then you start blaming the church. Well, the church isn't giving me enough. Well, what are you doing in those 6 days of the week? Yeah, the church has a role. I have a role here. One of my jobs is to preach, is to teach, and is to worship together. But during the 6 days of the week, we all have to take that personal responsibility. We all have to not be perfect in doing it, but we have to go deeper. We have to want to go deeper. And in corporate America, there is this, most of the leaders and the CEOs, they constantly talk about wanting to be better leaders and to go deeper and to gain insight and wisdom. And they do this by taking long walks or climbing Mount Everest or doing something out of the ordinary to try to gain a deeper understanding of themselves or of the world around them. We too as Christians have a role to go deeper. We have a mission to go deeper. But here's how we need to go deeper. In Romans 11:33, Romans chapter 11 with verse 33. And I love this verse. Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God. The depth of the riches, wisdom, and knowledge of God. If you want to know more about God, if you want to be wiser, if you want to be spiritually rich, you got to go deeper. You got to go deeper. There's never a point in this walk on earth where you're finished with searching the unsearchable depths of God. There's no point. In fact, I would argue the more you know of God, the more you realize you don't really know. The more you search, the more you strive, the more you want to go deeper, the more you realize just how hungry and thirsty you truly are. Matthew 5:6 says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, who realize that there's a true hunger, that there's a true thirst. And so tonight we're going to talk about this, how this process looked in the life of Paul. What did it look like after he met Jesus on the road to Damascus? From then to where we found him a week or two ago, before kings, and eventually he went before Caesar. How did he get there? And remember, it didn't happen in just an instant. We see throughout the Bible that when God wants someone to go deeper, when God wants someone to experience a different level of understanding of himself or of the mission for their lives, sometimes he takes them out from where they are and he puts them in another place. And we go all the way back to Abraham, where he says, go from where you are now in the land of Ur and move, because you'll see in that process my plan for you. We see it with Moses, who was raised as a prince, a wealthy prince, had all the riches that he could ever want. After 40 years, he went into the desert. He went to Midian, and he worked as a shepherd, basically. And then after another 40 years, at the age of 80, he met God in the burning bush, and God said, go back to Pharaoh. 80 years old. It didn't happen for Moses overnight. He didn't wake up one day and said, I'm going to lead these people out of Egypt. Joseph, he was not by his own will, but he was put into prison for 2 years. He was alone. He was out of his element. Time alone with God. Elijah, he spoke before the king and prophesied against the king, and after that he fled into the wilderness. He fled into a place of refuge, and God provided for him by a stream, and God gave him food and then spiritual rest as well. But he had to go from where he was. He had to be alone. He had to be outside from where people were, from where his comfort zone was, and go in the wilderness. We know John the Baptist, obviously, who lived in the wilderness and probably preached to the rocks, right? I mean, he was called out of the wilderness to prepare a way for the Lord. That's where he talked to God. That's where he discovered his purpose. It was outside in the wilderness. It was going deeper. It wasn't at a superficial level. And even Jesus, after he was baptized, went out into the wilderness, was tempted 40 days, 40 nights. There is this theme. If you want to discover the mission, the will of God in your life, sometimes you have to get out of your comfort zone. Because if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting. And sometimes we kind of go around in a circle and say, I'm searching for God, I'm searching for God, I want to know more, I want to know more. Good. But God said, if you want to know more, I need to take you out a little bit, because I want to show you something else from a different angle. I want to give you some perspective. Because we lose perspective a lot of times, don't we? We rely on our own strength, on our own wisdom, on our own riches, and we're going in circles. So we get to Paul. Paul, in Galatians chapter 1, and we'll start with verse 10, and this will be our text for tonight. Galatians 1:10, and he's talking here about what happened to him after this conversion, and how he really cemented the foundation of his walk with God. For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God, or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. For I would have you know, brothers, that the gospel that was preached by me is not man's gospel. For I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it, but I received it through a revelation of Jesus Christ. And then skip down to verse 15. Verse 17, sorry. Nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me, but I went away into Arabia and returned again to Damascus. Then, after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to visit Cephas and remained with him 15 days. We see that Paul went away as well. After he had received this revelation from Jesus, he went away. He didn't go directly to Rome or to Jerusalem. He went to Arabia. He went outside of where he was used to going. And we see there how he developed a deeper life and a deeper walk with God. And we're going to look at a few things tonight of how that deep life looked like in the life of Paul, and how it could look like for us as well. So the first thing, back in verse 10, He says, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of God." Notice he says, am I still trying to please man? This means that at one point in his life, Paul was trying to be a people pleaser. He was trying to gain the approval of those around him. Maybe it was his family, his relatives, his co-workers at the Sanhedrin, maybe some influencers in society. He was really trying to please them, and it was working. It was working. We spoke about last week and the week before, or 2 weeks before rather, that he was very zealous. He was very eager, and people were noticing. He wanted to go on his own mission to go persecute Christians. He took initiative, right? He wanted to show others how good he could do it. He wanted to please them and show that he could do a good job. He wanted a good reputation. He wanted people to think highly of him. And to get that reputation, he was persecuting Christians. It's good to have a good reputation, and the Bible talks about it. It's good for people to say, that person's a nice person, they're very kind, they have a good reputation. But you can have a good reputation, but a terrible character. Because reputation is what others think of you. Character is what God thinks of you. You can be superficial and show yourself good to others and put on a show for others and maybe try to project the things you wish people would see, but the character is something else, and God sees that character. You see, ultimately, if we try to please both people and God, we'll come to a fork in the road where we have to choose. Are we going to try to please people? Are we going to try to project what we think they want to see for us? Or do we want to be faithful to God? Do we want to have a life of character? Because you can have a good reputation. You can be the most popular person in your school or in your workplace, or do anything to get that promotion at work. But if your character is suffering, it's all for naught. It's superficial. It's not deeper. And Paul realized that. In his 3 years away from where he grew up, away from the people he knew, he realized, I've been pleasing people too much. I've been trying to kiss up to them, and I've been trying to do whatever they want me to do, even though it goes against what I believe in. And Paul, I believe during that time, realized enough is enough. I can't go and try to please people because it's ruining my character. I have to please God. Now here's what can happen. Most times, when we focus on our character and we focus on what God wants from us and we want to please God, we have a good reputation, right? Even if others don't agree with you. They say, hey, well, I don't agree with them, but at least they have a good reputation or a good character. But sometimes we suffer for the name of Christ. Sometimes when we focus on our character and when we do what the Bible calls us to do, others turn around and call us all kinds of names, whether it's fanatic or that goody two-shoes or a bigot, whatever. These words will get thrown at us. But the important thing is to try to please God first, amen? To focus on character development first before we care about what other people think of us, because character precedes reputation. Superficiality makes us feel safe. It makes us feel like no one could see the real us. The problem is, of course, God sees us. And God sees the true nature of our character. But we feel safe when we project something that we're really not. And I was trying to think of how does this look like practically? What does this look like in our lives? And I think the biggest way this looks like in our lives is through social media. Now, before you turn off your brain and you're like, here's an old guy talking about social media, hear me out, okay, please. I use it myself. I think pretty much all of us do. It's a part of our lives, right? But at the risk of just sounding like old and out of touch and like, back in my day, please hear me out. Please, because I was on Facebook before all of you. I promise you. I promise you, before all of you, I was on there, okay? I've been on there a long time. These are not neutral tools. Social media is not a neutral tool. A shovel is a neutral tool. With it, you can dig a hole, and with it, you can bonk someone over the head, right? It all depends on how you use it. But that shovel is never going to influence you to do one thing more than the other. It's just a tool. Social media is not a neutral tool. Don't take my word for it. Just, I was about to say, go check it out online, which is also not really neutral, but research it, okay? I promise you, it's not neutral. The algorithms in there are made for you to keep on seeing what you want to see. It's not just hey, here's some random things. Here's some good things, maybe not so good things, and back and forth. It knows what you want. It knows what you desire. It truly does. And it'll show you those things over and over and over again. And before long, you and I think, this is what I'm supposed to look like. This is how I'm supposed to act. This is how my life's supposed to be. It has to look something like this. Or for me, at my age, I'll use myself as an example, okay? Because again, I'm not trying to pick on any generation here. For me, I'll look at, I have a problem with looking at other churches. And I'll see their youth groups. I'll be like, oh man, we gotta look like that. Oh man, that's cool. Andrew, why don't we do that? Julian, why don't we do that? Like that's really cool. And I have to remind myself, that's might not be the reality. That might be a special event where they had, 500 people come and they had bands and everything, but it's not reality. It's a snapshot of a specific point in time. Or if my wife and I are looking together and we see other couples on vacation, we're like, oh man, everyone's going to Dominican Republic. Everyone's going to wherever else, right, to Florida. We haven't gone in a while. We need to go because everyone's doing it. When really it's because as we're scrolling, we stop on those pictures of a beach and of water, and the algorithm says, oh, you like pictures of water and beaches. Cool, I'll show you more of those, and more of those, and more of those. And then you're like, man, everyone's at the beach, and I'm not at the beach. What's wrong with me? Everyone has these clothes or this phone or whatever. Fill in the blank, right? What's wrong with me? Those things are superficial. Those things are a snapshot in time, and it's not reality. Superficiality is the expense, is the opposite of reality, of going deeper. And again, I may have just dated myself by saying I was on Facebook before all of you, but please heed my words. Please heed my words on this, because so much of it, if I think of it practically, it's social media, it's Instagram, it's these sites that just take up our times, and we put things on there to maybe please others as well, or to portray that image as well. So Paul had to stop trying to please people. He said, I'm going to focus on God. Other people might look a certain way or do other things, but that might not be the reality. That isn't the reality. The reality is I need to focus on God. And in verse 11 and 12, he says, for I would have you know, brothers, that the gospel that was preached by me is not man's gospel. For I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it, but I received it through a revelation of Jesus Christ. And in verse 15, but when he who had set me apart before I was born, and who called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son to me, in order that I might preach him among the Gentiles, I did not immediately consult with anyone, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me. And we continue on, but I went into Arabia. Upon salvation, he didn't go immediately to people. He didn't go to try to have his opinion formed by people. He didn't go to Damascus. He didn't go to Jerusalem. Instead, he said, guys, I got this from God. I'm finding it in God. I'm finding it through the Word, through the Scriptures, through the prophecies that we have. I'm trying to go deeper here. It's good to have accountability and to talk to others, but right now, I need God. I need to speak to God. If we want to go deeper in our relationship with God, we have to speak to God. We have to search for God. We have to go a little further away from where we are and say, God, I don't want to hear from people anymore. I want to hear from you. Now, we don't know exactly where Arabia was, okay? It could have been as short as like 100 miles from where he was in Damascus, or it could have been like close to Egypt. It's a big area. We don't know. We don't even know why he really went there, if we're really honest. Some people say he went to go preach the gospel to desert dwellers. We don't know that, doesn't say. Others say that he spent 3 years in there because that's how many years the disciples spent with Jesus. Okay, that sounds nice, but it doesn't say that in Scripture. So we can't say exactly why he went. But 3 years is like more than 1,000 days, right? Or close to 1,000 days. I'm not very good at math. So if you guys, okay. So it's about 1,000 unaccounted days of Paul's life, right after he was saved. I would like to think that during that time, he was talking to God. During that time, he was thinking, praying, meditating. In the verses that we read, he's saying, you know how I used to persecute the church. You know how I used to do things against the will of God. I would like to think he was thinking about those. I like to think he was saying, I've been pleasing people for way too long. I've been spending too much time on myself and not enough time on really searching for God. He had been so busy with his schedule, with his drive, with his passion, with his ambition, that he couldn't see the truth right in front of him. So he went to Arabia, we could say. I think some of us need to go to Arabia as well. Not physically, but we need to go to a place where we stop pursuing our own ambitions, where we stop in our hectic days and schedules and spend some time alone with God. You want to go deeper with God, you need to spend time alone with him. There's no shortcut around it. There's no 6 easy steps. There's no 7 steps for this. You need to spend time with God. You have to. You must if you want to go deeper. If you want to stay a superficial Christian and just come to church once a week and pray once in a while, you can do that, but it's right at the surface. And man, when those hard times come, you're going to wish you had deeper roots. And we all use the same excuse, and I use it too. We all use it. The number one excuse of why we don't read, why we don't pray, why we don't convene and communicate with God is what? I don't have any time. I don't have any time. We all use it, myself included. We all say we don't have any time. The truth is we make time for things that matter to us. The best gift you could give to a spouse is your time. The best gift you could give to your kids are time. The best gift you could give to your loved ones is time. It's not money, it's not possessions, it's time. Because when you develop those relationships, when you spend time in those relationships, you have a history together. If you speak with someone and you talk with them once a week or a few minutes per week maybe, that relationship is not deep, it's pleasant, it's superficial. The more time you give, the deeper you get into that relationship. And then when the hard times come, you can go through it together. And this is for every relationship, friendship, for spouses, and especially in our walk with God, especially in that. In fact, it must start from that. Because the more time we spend with God, the deeper relationship we have with God. Oh, the depths of your riches and wisdom. You want to find those? You want to know them? It's a matter of time. Physical time. 1,000 days for Paul. 3 years alone, away from his people. Maybe he was completely alone. We don't know, but 1,000 days after he had met Jesus, what do you think was going through his mind? What do you think he was thinking about and praying about when he was away from the distractions of his old life, when he was away from the distractions of the world? He had his own place to go to and figure that out. I knew a pastor when I was in college. He was a Messianic Jewish pastor, so he had a lot of Jewish tradition and culture, but he believed in Jesus. He believed in the Messiah, and so we would go over to his house for Bible studies once a week, and he really opened up my perspective on how to worship God in a lot of good ways. One of the things he had that I found fascinating is in his basement, he had an area that was reserved only for alone time with God. That's it. Not just for him, but like his family too, right? It wasn't just for him. He had kids and wife. But he set up an area, and he said, in this place, look, I have a few chairs here. I have a little pulpit there. I have this Bible. This is where I get away and get with God. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, he probably pulls out a guitar. Maybe he sings a little bit. He prays a little bit, and he goes back upstairs. And one time he showed me his process, and I'll never forget it. He just sat down on the floor and closed his eyes and started thinking about God. And he invited me to do it as well, right? We weren't chanting, we weren't anything. He was just, let's just sit down. And for me, my mind was racing like, oh my goodness, like what's happening? Like, I've never done this before. Am I supposed to be, like, my breathing's all weird. My legs are cramping up. Like, what's going on? But he had practiced this over and over and over again, to the point of where this is where he went to get away from the world and the concerns and even his own thoughts that were weighing him down, and give it to God and meet with God. He practiced that. He wanted to go deeper. Do you have that in your life? It doesn't have to be a room. It doesn't have to be a physical place. Do you have a place, whether it's a time of the day, or even the place in your room or somewhere in your home or something where you can do that, where we can do that? It's so important that we get into that good habit of going deeper with God, of spending time with him. There is no shortcut around it. I know that Robert Martin, the evangelist, last week, he preached about what? He said God can do it in an instant. He said it doesn't have to take a year, a month. It could happen in an instant. And yes, it can. He can break through absolutely in an instant. But here's the thing. We don't get to tell God how he operates. We don't get to say, okay, God, I want it right now, or okay, God, I'm going to pray and fast about for 5 years, and then you're going to work. We don't get to say when God works. We just have to be ready, and we have to listen. Because if we're not listening, we might miss it. If our hearts are not humble and waiting for that voice of God, for that wisdom, for that richness, if we're not ready for that, if we're not in that deep place, we might miss it. And we might stay superficial. We can't use that excuse anymore of I don't have time. We can't use it. And we all use it, but we can't. Because your life is not going to get any less busy than it is right now. It's not. 10 years ago, it was probably less busy, right? If you think of your life 10 years ago, maybe it was less busy, or maybe you just don't remember 10 years ago how it was exactly. I remember 10 years ago because it was before I had kids, and so yeah, it was a lot less busy. But 10 years from now, I can almost 100% guarantee you it will be busier. It just will be. Because we get more things in our lives. We get more responsibilities. We get jobs and spouses and kids and debt and mortgages, and our lives don't get less busy. It just becomes a matter of how are we going to use that time, because it matters. And how will we use that time? Now, the good news is that our well can really run dry if we try to do it ourselves and we don't spend time with God. But the best source to make sure we don't have a well that goes dry is to get into the Word, is to get with God, and that well will never run dry. If you want to go deeper with God, spend time with God. There's no shortcut around that. I'd like for us to stand up and invite the team up here. I've said a lot in this evening. I've used many words. Because that's kind of my job right now, right? Is to talk and get up here and share. But when it comes to us and God, certainly we have to pray to him. We have to talk to him audibly. But there's also a time where we have to listen. If you want to go deeper with God, speak less, listen more. Speak less, listen more. Ecclesiastes 5:2 says, "Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven, and you are on earth. So let your words be few." Stop trying to please people. Spend time with God. Speak less. You want to go deeper and have a stronger relationship with God the Father? Spend time with him. Stop worrying about other people. Spend time with God and speak less. Just listen. It can happen in an instant where that breakthrough that Robert and Mom were saying about last week can happen. Or it can happen as you're waiting and listening and asking God, work in my life. Let me have a deeper relationship with you. For him to cultivate a greater hunger for authenticity as he grows in our lives. For us to not be superficial Christians. And I want to finish just by reading the lyrics of a song that have rung true in my life many times. And it says, if you want to go deeper, here's what it says. Clear the stage, set the sound and lights ablaze, if that's the measure you must take to crush the idols. Jerk the pews and all the decorations too, until the congregation's few, then have revival. Tell your friends that this is where the party ends. Until you're broken for your sins, you can't be social. Then seek the Lord and wait for what he has in store. And know that great is your reward. So just be hopeful. We don't need to come week after week superficially. We need to be real. We need to be authentic. Are you ready to go deeper in your life? We always have to go deeper, no matter the age. At your age, at my age, at my parents' age, my grandparents' age. Because, oh, the depths of his riches and his knowledge and wisdom. Who can ascertain them? Who can judge them? No one. If you want to go deeper in your relationship with God, if you truly want to have more than just a superficial relationship, spend time with him, talk to him, and listen for his voice. Let's worship.